Samayach, y'all. It's customary for the teachings on Hanukkah to run into midnight, but that's all right. We have time. This is a Menorah versus Hanukkah by Menachem Posner. He writes for Chabad.org. Every year, as Hanukkah approaches, writers and others struggle to find the right word. Menorah or Hanukkah? Are the two terms the same? Is one more proper than the other when describing the lamp lit on Hanukkah? Stay with us, and we will shed some light on this important subject. In Hebrew, the word menorah simply means lamp and can refer to any number of lamps, including the 7-branched candelabra lit every day in the traveling tabernacle and later in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. This menorah sits at the heart of the story of Hanukkah when we celebrate how the menorah was kindled with just enough oil to last for one day, but miraculously remained lit for 8 days. For much of our history, menorah is also referred to the celebratory 8 or 9 flamed candelabra lit in Jewish homes and public spaces for the 8 nights of Hanukkah. Sometime around the turn of the 20th century in Israel, the Hanukkah menorah became known by another name. The modern Hebrew term Hanukkah is widely attributed to Hamdah ben Yehuda, 1873 to 1951, and refers only to the Hanukkah lamp and no other. In truth, this name is much older than that and can be found in the writings of Rabbi Avraham Mahukas, 1699 to 1767, reflective of the terminology used by the Ladino-speaking Jewish community in the Holy Land. Which term is preferable to use when referencing the Hanukkah lamp? It depends. When speaking of modern Hebrew, one can safely assume the audience would be more familiar with the term Hanukkah, especially since menorah can also refer to a ceiling light. So, however, when speaking to an English-speaking audience, menorah is more historically accurate and therefore the preferred term. Well, speaking of the Hanukkah or menorah, who is the shamash? The shamash is the servant candle which gives light to the others. This is an article by David Brickner, who wrote for Jews for Jesus on their website. Shamash is a Hebrew word that means servant. In the Jewish community, shamash, also spelled shamas, commonly refers to the sexton, the person who manages the synagogue facilities and keeps things running smoothly. In the Middle Ages, the term referenced a more prestigious position. The shamash helped to conduct prayer, lead the worship services, and even carry out and enforce the judgments of the Jewish community leadership. Shamash also refers to the 9th candle on the Hanukkah, that is the candelabrum that is used to commemorate and celebrate the 8 nights of Hanukkah. The shamash is the first candle to be lit each of the 8 nights of the festival, and it is used to light all the other candles. So the shamash is more than just a candle. It is the servant light by which all other candles of Hanukkah receive their light. Because of this, its meaning is transcendent, provoking reflection on the beauty of its light and the meaning of its purpose. That meaning points beyond the simple candle to a special person. The shamash usually holds a special position on the candelabrum. On some Hanukkahot, it is raised slightly above the other candles. On others, it is placed below the row of 8. After all, the position of a servant ought to be subservient. And that is where things can get interesting. Just as the shamash in the synagogue was understood at one time to occupy a more prominent role, so the shamash of Hanukkah can be seen to have greater spiritual significance, made even more profound as we consider the relationship between Hanukkah and Christmas. Contrary to the lowly or demeaning place servants occupy in many cultures, God elevated the role of servant, and one servant in particular. Scriptures reveal the surpassing significance and prominence of the servant of the Lord. The image of this Shamash points directly to this biblical concept. Who is this Shamash? Who is the servant of the Lord? First, the servant of the Lord is a special designation that confirms a unique relationship with God. God refers to people like Job, Abraham, Moses, Joshua, and David as my servant. This title indicates a certain intimacy God had with these people, as well as a special calling he had placed on their lives. In today's culture, we do not often think of the role of servant as a position to aspire to. But to be the servant of the Lord in Bible times was a great honor and a high calling. Second, God uses the term, the servant of the Lord, to refer to the nation of Israel, making numerous references to them as Jacob, my servant, or Israel, my servant. This does not mean that every Jewish person had the same intimate relation with God that Abraham, Moses, and David enjoyed. It does mean that Israel was an elect nation. God had chosen Israel as a people, through whom he would accomplish his purposes, regardless of how the individual members of the nations were disposed towards the Lord. That Israel was and is an elect people and God's servant was no guarantee that all the people of Israel would serve him, nor that they would all be in a personal relationship with him. This is especially important for Messianic believers to understand as we think about the Jewish people today and each individual's continuing need for God and for his salvation. Third, the term servant is used in the Scriptures prophetically to refer to the coming Messiah. For example, the psalmist refers to my servant David in Psalm 89, not speaking of David himself, since the psalm was written after his death, but of David's greater son, whom God had promised would sit on the throne of Israel forever. This mention of David is none other than a direct reference to the Messiah who was to come. In the same way, Isaiah speaks not only of God's servant Israel, but also of Israel's greater son, the Messiah. It was through this servant that God promised to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved ones. Some translations say elect of Israel. I'll also give you as a light to the Gentiles, that you should be my salvation to the ends of the earth. That's Isaiah 49:6. That is a tall order indeed. But the Shamash of our Hanukkah reminds us of this promise concerning the Messiah. He would be a light to the nations and God's salvation for all people. In fact, Jewish people are instructed to place our Hanukkah prominently in the windows of our homes, visible to all as a sign of our continued faith in the coming of the Messiah. That is why it is so significant in the gospel accounts that the angel of the Lord instructed Joseph to name the child Yeshua, which means God's salvation. That's Matthew 1:21. That is why Simeon explained when he first saw the baby Jesus, he was indeed a light to bring revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people, Israel. That's Luke 2:32. Yeshua is the servant who was brought low in order that he might become lifted up for all to see. He is the one through whom God's light would be kindled in the hearts of so many people all around the world. Yeshua is God's Shamash. Because he is, so are we. Yeshua told his disciples, "You are the light of the world." Matthew 5:14. What do you think of that means for us who would follow him. Rabbi Shaul, or Paul, understood this great truth. He explained his calling as apostle to the Gentiles as a direct fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy, quoting, "For so the Lord has commanded us, I have set you as a light to the Gentiles, that you should be for salvation to the ends of the earth." Acts 13:47. How stunning that Shaul would identify his entire ministry as part of the fulfillment of the prophecy of Isaiah 49. But that is exactly his meaning here. Shaul is saying, I too am the Shamish. Might we be so bold? I gain incredible inspiration from the apostles' application of this scripture. I see it as a direct reference to our ministry in Jews for Jesus. We too are the Shamish of God. This month, our ministries are out and about sharing the good news of the Messiah with Jews and Gentiles all around the world. We are handing out tracts in places like Macy's in New York, Harrods of London, and at Hamish Bar in downtown Jerusalem. We're inviting people to become reconciled to God through faith in his servant Yeshua, or Jesus. Is there a higher calling in life? I think not. But the wonder of it all is that if you know Yeshua, he invites you to become his Shamish too. I do not know what your season of life will entail, where you travel, with whom you will speak, and how you'll spend this last month of the year 2023. It seems to me that if we understand the meaning of this special season, we will without a doubt understand a special role for ourselves this holy season. We are the light of the world. We too are called to be God's Shamish.